started with the buyer representation agreement exclusive. Now, just kind of a little background about myself. I am a lawyer. I'm also a real estate broker. I no longer practice. I teach full-time real estate at Mount San Antonio College. I do these classes to give exposure to our real estate program. I realize all of you have real estate licenses, but you know people entering the business. And as I like to share with people, you're going to learn more in real estate principles from me than a correspondence course. And, you know, just giving exposure to our program. So that's the end of my commercial. Let's go ahead and get into the topic. Now, what we need to know about the buyer representation agreement exclusive is that it is one of 3 different agreements. If you would, think of the buyer representation agreement as a listing of a buyer. You know, when we go out and we meet with a seller to list their property, we are listing their property. If that seller sells that property to somebody, we get a commission, hopefully. Well, with the buyer representation agreement, if that buyer buys a property, we're entitled to a commission. Now, just like with listing agreements, you've got open listings, you have exclusive agency listings, and you have exclusive right to sell listings. Well, there are 3 buyer representation agreements. There is the buyer representation not for compensation. In other words, if the buyer buys a property from somebody else without you, they don't owe you a commission. That's not a whole lot of good, is it? No, I don't like that one. Next one is the buyer representation non-exclusive. The way that one works is if you show a buyer a property and they buy property from somebody else, you're entitled to a commission. However, if a buyer goes out and sees the property without you, they go to an open house, they go to a new tract development, you don't show them the property, somebody else does, you're not entitled to a commission, no commission, okay? The third one, buyer representation exclusive. The way that works is if a buyer who has signed one of these agreements with you buys a property, whether they buy it with you, buy it from somebody else, buy it on their own, doesn't matter. They owe you a commission. So you're entitled to a commission if that buyer buys a property under that agreement. Conceptually, it's like an exclusive right to sell. In other words, if that seller sells their property to their brother, mother, doesn't matter, and you have an exclusive right to sell listing with them, you're entitled to a commission. It protects you from your buyer going to work with somebody else. Now, before we get too deep in this agreement, I know some of you are probably thinking, well, the way I do things is just fine. Why do I need this agreement? The bottom line is you don't need this agreement. If at the end of today's presentation, you say, you know, I don't like this contract, I'm not going to use it, you're not going to hurt my feelings at all. It's up to you whether you want to use it or not. If, however, don't appreciate buyers working with more than one agent. If you have experienced with a buyer where you thought they were going to write an offer with you, and they go and they write an offer with somebody else, and if you were frustrated by that, then maybe you might want to consider using the buyer representation agreement with your buyers, okay? And it's up to you. I think an agent is better off if you use this agreement. Now, as we go through this agreement, you're going to think of objections. You're going to have a reluctance to use this agreement because you're afraid the buyer's going to object and you're not going to know how to overcome that objection. So I invite us all to role play as we go through this agreement. And what I'm going to do as I go through sections of the agreement, I'm going to pause and see if there is any objections or concerns that you might have. And I'm going to play the agent and you get to be the buyer. You see, when you ask people, do you like role playing? Everybody says, yeah, we like role playing. Wrong. You like watching other people role play, right? Nobody wants to be in the role play. And if you are in the role play, you always want to be the buyer or the seller. Nobody likes being the agent because that's the tough job. Well, I'm going to be the agent and you get to play the buyer. So we can role play, if you like, as we go through this, so that I can answer any objections that you can put forth as the buyer against signing this agreement. Now, before we get into the actual terms of the agreement, okay, you need to develop an introduction script. You need to present this form, this contract, to the buyer. Just like when you go out on a listing presentation, right? You sit down and you present yourself to the seller. You tell them about yourself, your company, your marketing plan, right? Go through your pricing analysis, okay? And they're so excited that you're going to represent them, right? Well, you need to do the same thing. Now, with a listing presentation, that can go 45 minutes, right? This is very short. I'm going to give you my script to the buyer representation agreement. It goes something like this. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I'm very excited to have the opportunity to represent you in the purchase of your future home. This is an exciting time. It's also at times a little scary because for most people, buying a home is the biggest financial commitment they're going to make. But my job is to make it easy or easier and to make it as transparent as possible. Now, something that I like to do is have an agreement with my buyer. I think it's important that you have representation. And in order to have effective representation, we need to enter into an agency agreement. And that's what this buyer representation agreement does. It appoints me as your representative, your agent, to get you the property you want at the terms and the price that you want. I feel you need that representation. Now, I will tell you that there are agents out there that don't use a written agreement with their buyer. I'm not sure why, but they don't. But I think your representation is most important. You see, when you sign this agreement, I become your fiduciary. Under the law, that is the highest level. There is no higher or greater duty of care than a fiduciary to their principal. And I think I owe that to you, and that's why I want to have this agreement between us. You know, every now and then I run into a buyer who thinks that if they call the name on the for sale sign, who we call the listing agent or the seller's agent, they think they can get a better deal. What they don't realize is that agent has an agreement with the seller. And that agreement is to get the seller the best deal, not the buyer. You don't want to go into a transaction unrepresented. I mean, you want somebody to represent you. I mean, if you were charged with a crime, would you ask the district attorney to represent you? No, you want your own attorney to represent you, right? And you're going to say, of course, exactly. Well, what this agreement has is an agent to represent you. So using that script, I think makes it a little easier to present the agreement to them. Now, before they sign that agreement, before you even present that agreement to them, they have to sign the agency disclosure form. Just like when you go and meet with a seller, before that seller signs a listing agreement, they have to sign an agency disclosure form. Now, this form does not create agency. The agreement creates agency. The listing agreement or the buyer representation agreement, that creates agency. This discloses the difference between single and dual agency. And Civil Code 2079 requires that you have the buyer or the seller sign this agreement, or excuse me, back up, sign this disclosure before they sign a listing agreement or a buyer representation agreement. Okay, so they have to sign this form first. Just remember, this is always the very first piece of paper a buyer or seller will ever sign. Then you want to give them the buyer representation, or excuse me, the possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, the PRBS form. Now, the earlier form, the AD form, this is required by law. The Civil Code requires you to use this form. This form is disclosed in the contract, the purchase agreement. It's also referenced in the listing agreement and in the buyer representation agreement. So it is a contractually required form. It should be the second form that your buyer or seller signs. So the first form your buyer or seller signs is the AD form. Second form your buyer or seller signs is the PRBS form. So you need to have both these forms signed before you take the listing, before you sign the buyer representation agreement. So just remember, this is the second form that the party will sign. Then talk a little bit about COVID. Okay, so nobody likes COVID. I don't like it any more than you do, but we're stuck with it. Before you show a buyer properties today, they have to sign this COVID PEAD form. Okay, PEAD. They must sign the PEAD form. Now, you'll notice there on the top line, it has a place for property addresses. You have to put all the addresses in. Probably not. It'd be nice if you put at least one address in. If you have more addresses than you can fit, you might want to use that CIR addendum. Okay, but the important part of this form is this form has to be signed each day you take your buyer out. Can you use one form for a week's worth of showings? And the answer is no, because while this form explains the risks of going out of your house and walking into people that might have COVID, right? It also asks the buyer, how are you feeling today? Have you been in contact with anybody who may have or has tested positive for COVID? Because if you have, we don't want to take you out today, right? You need to stay home until you test negative, or you make it through those 10 or 14 days. I'm not sure where we are with the CDC right now. But every day you take a buyer out, you need to have them sign a new one of these forms, because they could feel fine today and tomorrow they could be sick, right? So you can't use the same form for 2 days. So new form every day, okay? So that's the PEAD form. Then we have to make sure that the house we're going in has these posted rules of entry. This is the narrative version, and we also have the pictorial version. So both of these have to be posted on the property. Now, a good listing agent will have these laminated and posted on the front door or above where the lockbox is, so it's accessible and visible before you enter the house. If you don't have one of these forms, can you post the PEAD form? Yes, you can. This form will actually, or can be used for posting, but it's not as good as this one. So please make sure this form is posted. And hopefully the listing agent and the seller have it posted on the door. If, however, they do not, it is your responsibility as the agent showing the property to post it. Okay, so it needs to be on the front door before your buyer walks into the house, right? If it's not on the front door, you need to post it. Or if the lockbox is around the side and you and the buyer go around the side and it's posted there, that's fine. The bottom line is the buyer needs to see this form before they go into the property. So please make sure this is posted, okay? And the responsibility for it being posted before the buyer goes in rests on the agent showing the property to the buyer, okay? And that takes us to the BRE contract. But we've got some questions up in the chat, so I always like to catch that when I finish a section. And let's see, PEAD-V rules I received earlier said no need for address, but we must put the address of the listing in the subject line of the email. I'm not really sure what the question is here. My understanding is every buyer, as well as every visitor, that can be an appraiser, a home inspector, a roofing contractor, anybody entering a property needs to sign the PEAD-V form before they go into the property, and they should sign a new PEAD form each day. That is in compliance with the government's order, okay? As far as the address on the form, I think what CAR was envisioning is under COVID, you're probably going to show 1 or 2 properties a day. So you could put the 2 addresses of the properties that you're showing on the form, all right? But the important thing is to give a new PEAD form to the buyers every day you go out. That's more important than having addresses on the form itself, all right? So hopefully I've got that there. We're talking about a subject line of the email. Okay, so if you email the form out, the problem is they're signing the form, which is probably an attachment, and it's not connected to the email. So I'm not sure the benefit of putting the address in the subject line of the email, because you're going to want to maintain a copy of the PEAD form, and that may get separated from the email. So I'd rather have the address on the PEAD form, but the important thing is to make sure you have a new PEAD form every day. Okay, so let us move on. And another question coming in. Got it. Okay, so success. First question down. Let's go conquer the first page of the form. So what I've done now is this is the first page. And now we're going to go to the first section. So we want to list the names of all the buyers. You don't want to have a secret buyer out there that might want to come back in and buy the property that you were showing to the other 2 potential buyers, right? So if you have a parent, an aunt, an uncle, a brother, sister, somebody who might be assisting with the purchase, they need to be on this contract as well, right? So all potential buyers need to be listed. If they're not listed and they don't sign this form, then they're not covered by this form, okay? So again, we want to put all buyers on there. And then you put the name of your brokerage company. And now we come to the term. Now, with the listing agreement, there are 3 objections, right? There is what you're going to price the property at, how long you're going to take the listing for, and finally, what your commission is, right? 3 objections to the listing agreement. For the buyer representation agreement, there's only 2 objections. The first one is commitment. They don't want to be committed to you. The second one is commission. We're going to overcome both of those. Why? Because we have to. I am not a good teacher if I don't teach you how to overcome those, right? You do not go on a listing presentation without being prepared to overcome an objection on price, term, and commission, right? I cannot present this form to you without showing you how to overcome the 2 objections. And the first one is commitment, or how long you're going to take this contract for. Now, with a listing, how long do we usually take residential listings for? Well, we can take them for any amount of time, but I think most of us will say, well, about 6 months, right? Now, if you're taking a listing in November, December, you might want to take it to the end of June because we know the market slows down a little bit in November, December because of the holidays, right? But normally we take a listing for about 6 months. You could take this agreement for 6 months, but it's really not necessary. Think about it. If you have a ready, able, willing buyer, they want to go out and see properties. They have a real need. They are qualified. They want to buy. You start showing them properties today. And assuming you're showing them properties that they're interested in, how long till they start making an offer? Well, hopefully within a few days, right? A couple days, maybe by the end of the day, right? If you're doing your job and you're showing them properties that they want, you've properly qualified them. Yeah. So what I'm getting at is, while a listing on a house with a seller, you may take that for 6 months. This agreement here is for a shorter period of time, maybe 2 weeks, maybe a month. You could take it for 6 months, but if you're not writing offers by the end of the second week, something's going wrong with you and your buyer. You're not communicating, or your buyer is not serious about buying a property, right? Okay, so your first objection is going to come in. It's going to be something like this. Ms. Agent, look, you seem like a nice person. We like you, but golly, you want us to sign this agreement to work with you. And what if things don't work out? What if we don't like each other? What if what's going that's not a problem, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. Tell you what, we will begin this contract on February 16, 2021, and ending on 11:59 p.m. on February 16, 2021. So it will expire at midnight tonight. How does that sound? If you want to go out and work with another agent tomorrow, you can. This agreement will only be good for today. And then you can kind of make a little joke saying, you weren't thinking about looking at properties with somebody else later this afternoon, were you? They'll go, no. Say, great. We'll just make it for today. You see, if they won't give you a commitment for just today, they're probably working with another agent and they're wanting to see if you can find something that other agent hasn't found them, so they can go back to that other agent and have that agent write the offer, right? So you're only asking for a commitment for today. Now, a couple of you are probably saying right now, wait a minute, Ed. What's to stop them from writing an offer with another agent on the property I show them today? Because in this agreement, we have a safety clause. And let me explain that. I've got to go to the next page, okay? And you'll see there under C, broker right to compensation. What it says is, if I notify the buyer in writing, by letter, by email, if I notify the buyer in writing within 3 days of this agreement's expiration, and that buyer writes an offer with another agent or buys that property themselves without an agent, I'm still entitled to a commission. But you have to give it a time frame. So under C2, it says within blank calendar days after expiration. So how long do you want to put in there under C2? Well, I would put at least 30 days. 45 days would be better. 60 days would be great. So let's say I put under C2 45 days. I go out and I show a buyer 4 properties. And we talk about 2 other properties that I show them on the MLS, but they don't want to actually go see them, or we can't get into the house. So that's 6 properties I've discussed with them. before we show two others, we looked on the MLS and saw pictures, right? So at the end of today, since I've only made this agreement good for today, February 16, 2021, I'm going to write them a letter. Why am I going to write them a letter? Well, because I'm old fashioned, I'm old, I like letters. But if you want to send them an email and you have their email address, you can do that. But I'm going to write them a letter, and that's going to say something like this. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, thank you very much for allowing me to spend some time with you today and show you properties. To refresh your memory, the properties we saw or discussed were, and I'm going to list all 6 of those properties. And then I will say, if you have any questions about these properties or would like to discuss other issues, please don't hesitate to contact me by phone or email. And I'll give them my phone number and my email address. I will follow up with you in a couple of days to see where we are. Thank you very much. Ed Estes, your realtor, right? So I zip that out to those buyers. If those buyers buy either of those 6 properties within 45 days, because that's the number I put in the blank there under C2, they owe me a commission. So you see, I don't have a problem making this agreement for one day because any properties I show them today, I'm protected. Now, what's going to happen? Let's go back to the first page. What's going to happen tomorrow or the next day when we get together again and look at some more properties? Well, I'm going to bring this agreement out again, a new one. And they're going to look at this and say, didn't we already sign this? I said, yes, but we only made it for one day because you were a little concerned about entering into a long-term relationship with me, which I understand. And they look at you, so we have to sign one of these every time we go out? I go, no. I can make this for 2 weeks. I can make it for a month. I can make it for longer. You see, once you've established a relationship with your buyer, they typically will remain loyal to you. Some will not, which is why we have this agreement. But it kind of keeps everybody honest, right? So we've gotten over the first objection, okay? We'll get to the commission objection in a little bit. Now let's go into 1A, property to be acquired. Now, in terms of location, we need to identify where the property is that they're going to be obligated to work with us to acquire. Now, you don't want to be too broad, you don't want to be too narrow. Earth. Well, earth is too broad, right? I mean, legally, you can represent buyers anywhere in the state of California because your real estate license is good anywhere in California. But California is probably a little too broad because you're not going to be representing them purchasing property up in Humboldt, are you? No, not even remember that MLS up there, right? So I would recommend San Gabriel Valley, Inland Empire, if that is your geographical area. Now, I know some of you go down into Orange County. So if you are truly a tri-county realtor, you might use CRMLS because it'd be very difficult for you to show properties that is not in the CRMLS, okay? But don't use Walnut because if you put down Walnut and they buy a property in Industry or Diamond or Hacienda Heights, then this contract will not protect you. So don't use a specific city, unless, of course, you're in the heart of Los Angeles, then that might make sense. But I think it's best to use something a little bit broader. San Gabriel Valley, Inland Empire, CRMLS, something along those lines. So that's location, right? And that's where I recommend you go. Now, you have a blank for other if you want to have some more particulars. Price range, okay? You don't want to be too broad, don't want to be too narrow here either. So let's say we have a buyer who's looking for a property in the 800,000 range. Okay, 800,000. Is that buyer going to buy anything for 500,000? Probably not, right? If you have an $800,000 buyer, they're not going to be interested in a $500,000 property. Do you think they could afford anything over $1 million? Well, maybe, not much over. So I might do this. I might say price range 500,000 to 1.2 million. I know they can't afford 1.2 million. I know they won't want to live in anything at 500,000 or less. So I'm going to give it that range. I wouldn't say 780 to 820. That's too narrow. You want to make it broader, but don't put 0 to 10 million. I mean, that's ridiculous, right? So make it reasonable, okay, but make it a little broad. The low end will be a property they don't want to live in. The high end will be a property there's no way they could afford. Now, you can limit this to specific properties, and that would be 1A2. A buyer could conceivably say, hey, I want to buy this property. Will you represent me to purchase this property? They give you the address. I've had one of those. Okay, I will represent you on this property. Okay, so you could put in a specific property. Or they may be coming out of, say, a 1031 tax deferred exchange. They've identified 3 properties because that's what you do. Coming out for your up leg is identify up to 3 properties. So they have 3 properties for you. You list those 3. Can they buy something else? No, because once they've identified their properties and they're beyond the 45th day, they've got to buy one of those 3 properties. Okay. Or they could add dash a list. Okay. So again, this form can be used in a variety of situations, but for the most part, what are you going to do? You're going to stick with 1A1. Location, CRMLS, other, we leave blank, price range, I don't know, 400 to 1.2 million, whatever you want to use, right? Just make sure it's broad enough to cover. All right. Now moving on, we get into agency. Now, the first thing 2A does is confirm that we have given them the agency disclosure form because the law requires us to do that. Second, okay, it lets them know that there's a possibility that we could go into dual agency. Specifically, if we show this buyer a listing that is listed with our company, with somebody else in the office, we're going into dual agency because if our broker represents buyer and seller, we're representing buyer and seller. That's the law. Now, can you stay in single agency? Yes. If you go down to 2C(2), where it says or single agency only, you'll notice it says a box, broker's firm lists property for sale. And if you check that first box, you are saying that you're not going to show the buyer any of your company's listings. If you don't show your buyer any of your company's listings, will you stay in single agency? Yes, because you'll be showing them other brokerage companies' listings and you'll be in single agency. Now, do buyers want that? No, buyers want to see everything. They want to see your company's listings too. So don't check that box. The second box under there says that you work for a firm that doesn't list property. Not that your company doesn't have any listings. Your company does not allow you to take a listing. There is this boutique business model. They call it buyer representation, and they don't believe in taking listings. Now, I don't think it's a very good business model, but that's my opinion. Okay. They have their opinion. But if you work for one of those firms, then you can check that box, which means you won't have any listings because your company doesn't allow you to have listings. Okay. I'm guessing none of you will be checking any of those boxes. But by checking one of those boxes, you'll stay in single agency. We all know that there is a chance that we will go into dual agency. Okay, we've accepted that. We explain agency to our buyers and sellers, and we move on. But that's what that paragraph's for. Okay, I think I can say safely, do not check those boxes unless you've got a special situation. D merely says that there are people in your company that will be representing other buyers that might be looking for a similar property. E says that when you make an offer on behalf of your buyer, that seller and that agent of the seller may share terms of that offer with competing buyers. It's not confidential. And finally, we will confirm our agency relationship, either as single or dual, with the purchase agreement. That's in confirmation. Now we come to the next and fortunately the last objection, and that is compensation, okay, commission. Now, first of all, you'll notice in 10-point bold type, it states that commissions are negotiable and not fixed by law, right? Now, that is the law. Any effort for us to try to establish a commission rate association-wide or within a geographical area is illegal. It is a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. But we are going to have to talk about commissions here because I have to explain this form. So my duties as an educator trump the statute because I have to explain, but I am not trying to establish a commission. So let me be perfectly clear there. That's why we have in 10-point bold type, because the statute of frauds requires this disclosure, this notice to be listed in order to have a enforceable commission agreement. Now, let's get into the amount of compensation. This is where it gets a little tricky. Most of us will be checking 3A1 to put in a percent. Now, you could put in a flat fee, 3A2, or under 3A3, you could have a compensation schedule. And some of you are saying, what the heck is a compensation schedule? Well, if you do commercial leasing listing agreements will often have a schedule based on the term of the lease. It might be 5% of the first year's rent, 4% of the second year's rent, 3% of the third year's rent, and 2% for the total rent for the remaining term. Okay, that's how leasing brokers frequently do their commission schedule. All right. If you don't do commercial leasing, don't worry about 3A. Okay. 3A3. Don't worry about it. And I don't think any of you are charging flat fees. So don't worry about 3A2. Most of you are doing what? You charge a percent. So we're going to check the box under 3A1, and we're going to put in a percent there. Now, this is where it gets a little dicey. And let me stress again, I don't care what your percent is. But if you go out and take a listing from a seller and you take that listing at 6% because you intend to keep 3% and offer 3% through the MLS, how much are you offering in the MLS? 3%. Then under 3A1, it would likely be 3%. If you take listings at 5% and you're offering 2.5% to the other agent and you're keeping 2.5% for yourself and your broker, then you would put 2.5%. You see, what you put under 3A1 is typically going to be half of what you take a listing with a seller. Because when you list a property with the seller, you have to give a portion, frequently half, to the agent with the buyer. In this case, you are the agent with the buyer. So you're going to be getting that half that you would be expected to get from the MLS. So you're not going to see a 6% or a 5% under 3A1. You're probably going to see something more like a 3% or a 2.5% under 3A1 because you're on the buyer side. You're not representing the seller, collecting a commission for the seller for you and the other agent in the transaction. You're on the buyer side. You're just getting the commission coming to the agent representing the buyer, right? So hopefully we all get that, okay? Now, Laura, I'm sorry. I hope your ears were plugged. Please don't turn me into NAR and CAR telling them I'm trying to price fix. I'm not.
No problem.
I have to explain how this commission works because I don't want you going out there and not understanding it. Now, here comes the objection. The buyer is saying, whoa, stop. You want me to pay the commission? I thought the seller paid the commission. Why should I have to pay the commission? Say, no, Mr. and buyer, let's go to the next page. And at the very top under B, it says in bold type that if I'm being compensated through the MLS, whatever I am receiving through the MLS will offset what you have to pay here. So if we have 3% under 3A1 and I'm getting 3% from the MLS, you pay nothing. And that's important to understand because since you're being compensated from the MLS, the buyer doesn't have to pay you. Now, we have all kinds of little scenarios that can happen here. Many of you know that there are a lot of properties in the MLS where they're only offering 2.5%. First of all, buyers don't know that. You know that because you're a member of the MLS, but buyers don't know that. So they typically will never bring up the objection. If, however, they do, then I recommend you say to the buyer, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, if I show you a listing, they are offering me 2.5%. Even though this contract says 3%, I am not going to ask for the extra 0.5% from you. I am going to waive it, and I will waive it in writing when we go out and look at that property, if you are more comfortable with that. Or I can waive it before you write the offer. So you let them know. Also, and this is very important, some of you work for brokers or have managers who are insistent about getting what they consider to be a full commission. Meaning, if you have an opportunity to get a 3%, they don't want you to cut it to 2.5%. You need to have an agreement, an understanding with your broker or manager that you are going to be using the buyer representation agreement. And you are going to be putting in a 3% under 3A1. However, if you show a property and that listing, that MLS, is only offering 2.5%, you want the authority to reduce it to 2.5%, because that's what you would have been getting anyway without having the buyer sign this agreement. You see, we don't want to penalize a buyer for signing this agreement, all right? So you need to have that discussion with your manager, okay? You need to make sure you're on the same page. Now, some of you are thinking, well, why should I put an amount in there at all, since I'm going to be getting the commission from the seller through the MLS or the listing agent through the MLS? Well, there's a few reasons. First of all, we all know that there are listings out there in the MLS where they're offering you $2.50. And you don't want $2.50. You want 3%, right? Now, I call those listings where they're offering you $2.50 entry-only listings. You see, that agent has charged the seller a flat fee. They have taken an open listing, typically. They have put it on the MLS, and they have essentially walked away. And when you call them to show that property, they will tell you, you need to get your commission from the seller. I'm only offering $2.50. I'm not paying you a commission. Now, the good news is, and I've actually purchased properties and represented buyers with these entry-only listings. When you meet with the seller and you tell them that you are an agent and you have a buyer and you want to confirm your commission, in every case that I have been in, they immediately say, oh, yeah, you're going to get 3%. Yes, our broker told us we have to pay you 3%. They'll do it for you, okay? So here's how it's going to work. You will call up that seller. You will confirm your commission with them verbally. You will then show the property to your buyer. If your buyer writes an offer, you go ahead and write the offer. You confirm with the buyer that the seller has agreed verbally to pay your commission. And then before you present the offer to the seller, you will have them sign a single party compensation agreement. In the CAR zip forms library, it's SP, Sam Paul, single party compensation agreement. Okay. That will then create an obligation for them to pay you a commission, but it does not establish agency. You will still stay in single agency with your buyer. So in your list agency confirmation paragraph, in that paragraph where they talk about the seller's agent, you simply write down none. And then you are representing the buyer only. The same thing works with for sale by owners. What do we know about for sale by owners? Number one, they're cheap, right? They don't want to pay a commission. Number two, they don't know what they're doing. And they're terrified about going into a real estate transaction without knowing what they're doing. Once a for sale by owner has been out on the market for a couple of weeks, don't catch them the first day. First day, they think they're going to sell the property themselves. But after a couple of weeks of that for sale by owner sign out there and nothing happening, you knock on their door and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. for sale by owner, I am Robert Realtor. I have a buyer under contract. They're looking for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in this neighborhood. They've seen the other properties that are listed. Weren't really excited about them. I'd like to show them your home. Will you pay me a commission of, close your ears, Laura, 3%? And you know what that for sale by owner will say? Yes, we will. Why? Well, in that seller's mind, they don't want to pay 6%, but they will pay you 3%. Because you see, they think they're selling their property and you're charging them half price. They're getting a 50% discount. And what do we know about for sale by owners? They're cheap. They also don't know what they're doing. They've got an agent to walk this thing through escrow. They don't even know what escrow is. Title insurance? What's that? NHD? Huh? They will gladly pay you 3% to get their property sold because they don't know what they're doing. They think they're getting a deal. But here's something else. Your buyer may tell you, 8 months ago, we went to an open house over in Bucco Hills, and we liked it. Really? Do you remember the address? They go, yeah, we do. We have the old flyer. You can have your title company run the square footage of that house and pull up all the properties in that neighborhood with the exact same square footage. Ever notice when you go into a new home subdivision, the different models have very specific square footages? It's so you can identify that particular model. So this particular house is 2,138 square feet. You tell your favorite title rep, hey, over in Bucco Hills, can you pull up all the properties that are 2,138 square feet? Your title company within an hour or two will email you a listing of all those properties. You can call up those property owners, even if they're on the do not call list, because you're not soliciting for a listing, and ask them, hey, I have a buyer who's interested in purchasing a Plan B in your neighborhood. I understand your home is a Plan B. Is that right? And they say, yeah. I'm not asking for a listing. I just want to know if my buyer was interested in buying your property, would you be interested in receiving an offer? You know what they might say? Well, yeah. I mean, if you call 20 people, you think half a dozen of them might say yes? Yeah. And if you say, oh, by the way, my buyer has asked if you will pay me a commission for my side of the transaction, working with the buyer to put it together, of 3% or 2.5% or whatever it is you want to charge. Will you do that? What's that seller thinking? Well, you know, most agents charge 6. I only have to pay 3. I'm getting a 50% discount. That's a deal, right? Okay. Here's something else. I think we all know that most new tract home subdividers, developers, will pay us a commission if we walk a buyer in, right? Yeah, we know that. What happens if your buyer goes in on their own? You get nothing, right? I don't care if you've been working with that buyer for 6 months. If they walk into a new tract home subdivision by themselves, you got nothing. And sometimes that happens. But if your buyer signed one of these, you can then call up that developer. Don't talk to the host or the hostess, right? They have no authority. Speak to their manager and say, Mr. or Ms. Sales Manager, been working with a buyer for several weeks now. Fortunately, we had a little bit of a misunderstanding. They walked into your development the other day. They're going to say, you know the rule. You didn't bring him in. You don't get anything. Say, my buyer has a buyer representation exclusive agreement with me, which means they owe me a commission. I've had my buyer pre-qualified, and I don't think they can afford to pay me my commission and buy your property. I'd hate to see you guys lose this deal. I'd be very happy to email a copy of the signed agreement for you to take to your attorneys to discuss it. Now, what you guys probably don't know is that whenever you look at a new home tract subdivision, they're built in phases, right? So while phase 1 is being sold, phase 2 is under construction, and they're getting ready to break ground on phase 3. Meanwhile, they're trying to get their financing for phase 4. In order to get their financing for phase 4, they need a certain number of homes in phase 1 to go under contract. Your buyer has just put a house under contract with them in phase 1. If they lose that contract, they may jeopardize their financing for phase 4. They can't afford to do that. They will be happy to pay you money, not to screw up their deal, because you can enforce a commission agreement against the buyer. It gives you power against that developer. Now, how do we turn all this into a sales pitch for our buyer. Remember, our buyer doesn't want to pay the commission. This is how you approach it. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. Interestingly, in most cases, the property you will be buying will be in the multiple listing service. The MLS offers me a commission. So you're not going to have to pay anything, because clearly here in 3B, it says, if I'm being paid by the MLS, you don't have to pay anything. So why do we put that commission in this agreement? Well, the house that you want to buy may be in the MLS, but they're only offering a $2.50 commission. Okay, which means that other brokers will not show that property. I'm going to show you that property because with your permission, I will ask the seller to pay me a commission, and they will. But I have to ask them for it, and I have to get that in writing. Most other agents won't do that. That's why if you go out with another agent that doesn't have you sign this agreement, you're not going to see those properties, even though they're in the MLS. For sale by owners. For sale by owners, we'll pay a commission if I ask them, but I have to ask them. And I will, because this agreement requires me to show you all properties that may fit your needs, whether they are in the MLS at a full commission, whether they're in the MLS without a commission, or whether they're a for sale by owner or an unlisted property that you told me you like the house in that neighborhood. You see, this agreement allows me to show you everything, not just properties in the MLS that are offering me a commission. But before we write an offer on any property, with your permission, I will ask that property owner for my commission. And if they don't want to pay it, I will tell you that so you don't have to write an offer. But let me assure you, the seller is more than happy to pay a commission if that's what it means to get their property sold. You see, this is your closing line. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, the only way you'd be obligated to pay a commission, since we've already established that without this agreement, agents will only show you properties in the MLS where they're getting compensated. The purpose for this agreement is to show you properties where there isn't an advance agreement to pay a commission. The only way you would ever have to pay a commission is if you decide that you want to buy a property that you never would have seen. You see, without this agreement, a buyer will not be shown a for sale by owner. Without this agreement, a buyer will not be shown a property where they're offering $2.50. Without this agreement, a buyer will not be shown a property that's not on the market. But with this agreement, you can show them everything. And we've already established that if you ask that seller for a commission, particularly at 3%, because they're thinking 6%, they'll be more than happy to pay it. Okay, so let's go into the chat. So as of late, I am finding 2% for brokers. Should we check on the rates of our local commissions being paid to buyers agents? If you are happy with 2%, that's your call. I would put 3% in this agreement because if you're going to be representing a buyer on a for sale by owner or an unlisted property, you're kind of doing the work of both sides, right? There's not a lot of work to do with the seller because once you're in escrow, most of the legwork is dealing with the buyer and their loan and inspections and all that stuff, right? But you are going to be doing a little extra work if the seller does not have an agent. So I think you're entitled to your 3%. But if you're showing properties right now and you are accepting a 2% from the MLS and you're good with that, then I think it's only fair not to charge 3, not to charge 2.5, but to accept the 2%. But that's really your business call, okay? And again, commissions are negotiable, all right? Here's something else you can do. Let's say you want your 3, but that listing agent is only offering you 2. So call that listing agent up and say, hey, listing agent, I see you are only offering 2%. I showed my buyer your listing, or I want to show my buyer your listing, but 2% is a little low for me. Oh, by the way, I do have a buyer representation agreement with my buyer, which calls for 3%. My buyer doesn't want to pay the difference. Will you consider raising your offer of 2% to 3%? Now, without a buyer representation agreement, you can't do that. You can't do that because you're putting your financial interest, self-dealing, in front of the interests of your buyer, and that's a breach of fiduciary duty. But if you have a buyer representation agreement and your buyer is obligated to pay 3%, you can certainly say to your buyer, Mr. Buyer, do I have your permission to get that 3% from the other side, from the seller and the listing agent? You know what your buyer's going to say? Darn right you do. And that's what you're doing. So you're following the instructions of your buyer, and following the instructions of your buyer is your fiduciary duty. So what this agreement can also do is, if you're not offered enough in the MLS, you can talk to that other agent and say, hey, I want more. Why? Because I deserve it, and my buyer has asked me to get more. If your buyer asks you to do something, you've got to do it. That's the law, right? Remember though, if you're getting your commission from the seller, it's the SP form, single party compensation agreement. But if you're getting more commission or changing the commission being offered through the MLS, or if it's a non-MLS listed property, a registered listing, pocket listing, office exclusive, and you're trying to get the money from the other agent, that's called the CBC, Cooperating Broker Compensation Form, CBC. They're both in zip forms, but you need to remember, money from the agent on a listed property, CBC. Money from a seller, an unlisted property, SP. Okay, so just remember the difference in those two forms. All right. D, timing of the compensation, typically at close of escrow, or if buyer defaults. Upon buyer defaults, you may be able to seek it back from the buyer. Okay. If the buyer is prevented by somebody other than the buyer, and the buyer collects, you get half of what the buyer collects, not to exceed your commission, just like we have in the listing agreement with sellers. Okay. G. G is where you can exclude other brokers and other properties. If you are representing a buyer, they may have agreements with other brokers. Maybe they're coming out of an agreement with another broker before they start your agreement. So you can exclude that other broker, okay? Just like you can with a listing agreement. More commonly is going to be G2. If you start working with a buyer who is under a buyer representation agreement with an earlier agent, that earlier agent under their safety clause may have given them the list of 3 properties that earlier agent showed them, which means if that buyer buys one of those 3, the earlier agent gets commission. You need to exclude those properties under G2, okay? Because you don't want to have your buyer have to pay 2 commissions, all right? So again, I wouldn't worry about G, because nobody uses this agreement. The chances of you running into a buyer who has an obligation to pay another broker a commission because they were under a buyer representation agreement with that earlier broker is pretty rare, all right? But because we have the safety clause, which is 3C, we have to have a way to exclude, which is 3G. You'll find similar language in the listing agreement, right? All right. Paragraph 4 simply says that this property is probably being marketed through the internet. And even though after they buy the property, there may be some virtual tours or photos of this property running around cyberspace. Paragraph 5 gives us authorizations to represent the buyer. Right. Going to page 3. Oops, let me close in on this a little bit. Our duties as the broker, okay? We will assist, but we do not determine what the buyer offers for the property or what property they buy. Paragraph 7 states that the buyer will operate in good faith. It also allows us to do a pre-qualification or pre-approval on our buyer within 5 days, so we know they're qualified to buy the properties we're looking for. Paragraph 8, if we want to add any other terms. Paragraph 9 allows us to collect attorney's fees if we win the case against the buyer and we first try to mediate our dispute. Paragraph 10 states this is the entire agreement between us and the buyer. And now finally we go to the last page, which is our mediation clause, stating that before the buyer or the broker sues each other, we agree to sit down for mediation. If we fail to sit down for mediation, then we give up our right to attorney's fees if we win. And that's the extent of the agreement. So, some takeaway points. Remember, if the buyer is reluctant to signing the agreement, simply make the agreement for 1 day. Why wouldn't they sign an agreement for just 1 day? Unless, of course, they're already working with an agent and they have no interest in working with you. Well, if that's the case, you don't want to take them out and show them properties, right? So again, it's a way to get rid of buyers that are not legitimate. Then be sure to send them a very nice letter or email the day after you've shown them properties. I do it the same day, all right? Register those properties under the safety clause. It's also good follow-up, right? We want to have communication between us and our buyer because we want to go out and show them properties tomorrow or the next day, okay? Remember, in most cases, the seller will be paying the commission. So the buyer doesn't have to pay a commission. In fact, the only way a buyer will ever have to risk paying a commission if you show them a property that's not in the MLS. In other words, you show them a property they never would have seen had they not signed the agreement. If a buyer does not sign this agreement, you're only going to show them properties in the MLS where you're getting a full commission. You're not going to be showing them those $2.50 listings, are you? No, you're not. I know you're not. Probably should, but you're not. But if they sign this agreement, you're going to show them everything in the MLS. You're going to show them for sale by owners. You'll show them off-market properties. You'll introduce them to, you take them everywhere, right? Because you know you're secured. All you have to do is call the seller up and say, I have a buyer who may be interested in seeing your property. If it's on the market for sale by owner, or however, say, or maybe it's been expired. Say, I don't understand your listing has expired with your agent. Have you relisted it? They say, no. I hate all real estate agents because I had a bad experience with one of them. I say, I understand that. But would you consider paying me a commission of blank percent if my buyer buys your property? I'm not asking for a listing. I just want a verbal, will you pay me a commission? And most people say yes, right? They want to sell their property. So you show the buyer the property, the buyer likes it, writes an offer, but then before you present that offer, you have the seller sign that single party compensation agreement to which they already agreed to verbally, but the statute of frauds requires that we have a written commission obligation agreement. That's the SP form. Okay, you need to use that SP form. And you're good to go. So the BRE allows you to show all properties, listed, not listed, for sale by owners, to your buyers, providing you greater service. And that's what you're supposed to be doing, right? We give greater service to our buyers. Okay, we are fulfilling our fiduciary obligation. And of course, the BRE protects your commission. All right, so we got another comment in the chat. What if we do a 2.5% commission to be paid in 3A1? Does the buyer say on top of the 2 about receiving a credit for the excess? There is a box in the agreement that you could check that would allow a rebate to go back to the buyer. Yes. So if you're offered more commission through the MLS than what's in your agreement, that excess could go back to the buyer. But why do you want a 2.5? Why don't take a 3? Put 3 in your agreement. And if you have to come down, then come down. Don't negotiate against yourself. Trust me. I've been in the real estate business for over 40 years. I can tell you that most buyers, most sellers, the general public thinks that agents take commissions at 6% and they split it 3-3. That's what they think. Remember the old Purple Bricks commercials? They went along those same lines, right? I mean, of course, Purple Bricks doesn't exist anymore. They went out of business. Well, go, there it goes. Anyway, follow the trend of what people are thinking. See what happens if you put 3 in your agreement. You can always come down to 2.5. You can always come down to 2. Commissions are negotiable. But if you're going to be representing a buyer with an unlisted property, a for sale by owner, an off-market listing, or off-market property, I should say, you're going to have to be there for all of the inspections. You're going to have to be there for the appraisal. You can't count on the seller always being there. So you're going to be doing a little extra work. And since you are going to be doing a little extra work, I think you're going to earn that 3%. I really do. So my recommendation is go with 3. Try this. If you like what my class is about here, okay? If you're willing to do this, start doing 3. And if it works, send me an email and say, hey, it does work. Now, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I'm sorry. But I'd rather have you get the 3 than a 2.5 or a 2, right? Because you guys work hard for your commissions. You really do. Nobody knows that more than I do. Go for the 3, okay? And when I teach the listing agreement, I tell you to go for the 6, okay? And if you like this class, I'm sure Laura will schedule me at some point for the listing agreement class, and I can give you some tricks that you might want to try with sellers. I want to say tricks. How about scripts and presentations to make it easier to get your full commission or the commission you want on a listing as well? All right. Any other questions? I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Laura, do you see anything out there?
No, none.
No?
Only the ones that you've covered.
Okay. Well, you have here my phone number and my email. Don't call my phone number because Mount Sacs campus is effectively closed. We're teaching everything online, but I've got online classes, so I do respond to emails. I cannot give you legal advice. There's my disclaimer at the bottom, but I'm always happy to talk about real estate. So if you have a real estate question, you just want to chat about real estate, feel free to email me. Looking forward to an RLA class. That's great. Laura, do you take my classes? Do you record my classes?
Yep, this is being recorded. It'll
Okay,
be on the
so,
Tri-County's website.
okay, so there's probably a listing agreement class somewhere on the Tri-County's website. Laura, you might want to move that up so they can see that. And you can watch that, and then at some point you can watch me live. But anyway, feel free to email me. Happy to chat about real estate, just cannot give you legal or tax advice. And with that, I think I'm pretty much done here, Laura, unless you've got any other parting comments.
No, I'm good. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Very informative as usual.
Okay, thank you much, and hope you join us for the legal update middle of next month. And that's always a lot of fun.
March 24th.
March 24th, and you can pepper us with all your questions. And there's attorneys there that will give you legal advice. So nothing I say will be legal advice, but they'll give you legal advice, even though I am an attorney too. Well, thank you very much, and have a great rest of your week.
Bye. Thanks, Ed.
Bye-bye.